A ton of brand new players just got their hands on Mehmed II, and if you already had him, you just got 10 more sculptures of him because, well, if you've been logging in every single day for the past month during the Buy Star and Moon event, then on day 28 you got Mehmed for free. And Mehmed is probably my favorite gold key commander in Rise of Kingdoms because he's pretty much one of the only few that is even somewhat Season of Conquest viable. In my last KVK I used Mehmed on the battlefield and I was surprised with the results that I was able to get. So today I'm going to give you guys my updated guide for Mehmed in Rise of Kingdoms in 2025. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Make sure you drop a thumbs up on the video if you want more guides for older commanders. And with that being said, how do you get your hands on Mehmed? Well, of course, we just talked about the most recent way that they've introduced into the game to get your hands on him. But if you didn't get your hands on him from that event and you're watching this video, let's say 6 months down the line and that event is over, the most common way you're going to get your hands on Mehmed is through the golden chests. As we come in here, you'll see that Mehmed is a gold key commander, and with the recent changes that the developers have been testing in Pioneer servers, at least at the time of recording this, he will show up in your gold keys 1 week after the start of a brand new server, and then later down the line he's going to show up in the daily special offer if you do want to buy sculptures of him. But I will say, of all the commanders that show up in the daily special offer, he's probably not one that I would particularly expect players to get a ton of value out of, so maybe don't buy him from this bundle. But if you're only a couple of sculptures away from your next skill up and you think you could make good use out of him, at least you know he's here. Now that you know how to get Mehmed, let's talk about why he is my favorite gold key commander in Rise of Kingdoms, at least from an open field PvP perspective. And that's because of a few things. First of all, you might have noticed by now he is a leadership, conquering, and skill tree commander, which means, well, first of all, he's probably never going to be a primary commander. In general, the leadership tree is just not good for open field PvP. He is sometimes used for early game city rallies, but really I feel like we don't see Mehmed rallies anymore anyway. And so with 2 of his skill trees not being very great, the skill tree being quite good but maybe not enough to save him, he's probably always going to be a secondary commander. But the leadership tree is kind of a double-edged sword. It might not make him a good primary, but it makes him an excellent secondary commander. And why is that? Well, because none of his stats care about the troop type of your army, and we'll get into that in just a second. But let's go over his active skill. And if you don't have the expertise, it says it deals direct damage to up to 5 enemy troops in a fan shape with a damage factor of 1150, and every additional target reduces the damage to each target by 15%. This skill deals extra direct damage with a damage factor of 700 to watchtowers and city garrisons. This bottom part is one that you can basically ignore 100% because you're probably not going to be rallying or hitting cities with Mehmed in 2025. The other downside of this is that it is exclusive to city garrisons, so this literally does not work on flags, fortresses, or anything else like that. The main benefit here is that it's a 5 target AoE on a gold key commander. Now I will say that the fan shape for Mehmed is actually quite bad, and we can demonstrate that here in the expedition. You'll see that the fan shape is nothing to write home about. For comparison, let's see the AoE shape of Mehmed, and then we'll see the AoE shape of Joan of Arc. You can notice that Joan of Arc Prime's active skill has a much wider fan shape than that of Mehmed, which means Mehmed's active skill being 5 target is nice, but it is a little bit harder for him to hit his 5 targets than it is for virtually any other AoE commander in the entire game, with the exception of William, who's also a cav commander, but he's only a 3 target anyway. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's still a decent fan shape, and it is a 5 target AoE skill damage shot from a gold key free to play commander. The second skill says this commander's troop gains 20% attack and deals 20% more skill damage. Now this is what I was talking about before about the leadership tree being a double-edged sword, because while he's not very good as a primary commander, this 20% attack bonus can be given to any commander in the game and it will be effective. This is not the case for all commanders. If we take a look at Cao Cao, for example, he gets 30% cavalry attack, whereas if we look at Mehmed, it's 20% attack. It's plain attack, vanilla attack for anyone involved, which is nice. Same thing with the skill damage, 20% bonus to skill damage no matter who he is paired with. We like that a lot. This second skill is extremely versatile, and this is one of the main reasons why I love Mehmed so much. His third skill is where things aren't that interesting. It says whenever this commander's troop launches a basic attack against a city, it has a 10% chance to deal 1000 damage factor to the city's garrison with a 5-second cooldown. This is admittedly nice in the early game. You will get a lot of procs of this to really smash that garrison, but again, you're probably not rallying that many cities, and you're also probably not using Mehmed to do so So if you are looking at the fourth skill, it says this commander's troop gains 10% unit capacity. Well, that's actually really good. More troops on the battlefield equals dealing more damage. If you guys didn't know, I've mentioned this in many videos, but the damage factor of your normal attacks, so that would be your basic attack and your counter attack, also the damage of your skill damage, smite damage, combo damage, true damage, all of that is influenced by the number of troops that you have in your army. And if you're starting with more troops, you might have a leg up on somebody else that's out in the battlefield. Also, if this commander is leading a rally attack, you get a 10% rallied army gain. That is not very relevant, like I said before. And finally, the expertise actually enhances his active skill, and it bumps the damage factor up from 1150 to 1350, and it also bumps up the damage you deal to the city garrison and a 50% chance to deal even more damage to that city garrison. But once again, this part of the skill is not that relevant. So okay, we see his active skill is bumped up to a 1350 damage factor. Once again, still a bit lower than most end game commanders right now, but it's honestly really good for a gold key commander. Now let's go over some talent builds for Mehmed, because I know some of you guys are going to ask me about these, even though I just told you he's not great as a primary commander. Some of you might still want to just try him out, or he might be the only thing that you have for whatever reason. So let's go over a couple here. First of all, if you're using a mixed army, I would probably do something like this, assuming that you have a secondary also who is dealing skill damage. You grab Feral Nature, and along the way you get your hands on Rejuvenate and Clarity, and you grab Burning Blood, Heraldic Shield, and Tactical Mastery, as well as All for One. These are all very good talents in the skill tree. The skill tree is probably my favorite talent tree in the entire game, so we go all the way to the top there. Then we have to work with the weirdness that is the leadership conquering combo, and if it's a mixed army, I would do something like this, where you put 3 points into Armed to the Teeth, where you get 3% more damage, and Armored to the Teeth, where you take 3% less damage. Again, this is only if you have 3 different unit types. If not, these two are useless to you. Along the way, you grab Fresh Recruits, which gives you 3% more unit capacity, which is great. Hidden Wrath gets you extra rage every single time you are hit with a basic attack, and then you've got some points left over, so you grab the March Speed here in the leadership tree, and with 2 points left, you can either put them in Strategic Prowess for a 10% defense reduction every time you use an active skill, or you could put those 2 points somewhere else, such as Steely Soul for more normal damage. It would be 1%. Personally, I went with the debuff here, but it's up to you. If you're running a single troop type, then first of all, why are you using Mehmed primary? That's a horrible idea. But if you were, I would do something like this, where you grab Feral Nature, you grab 4 points in Strategic Prowess, and you grab all of the normal damage, the Fresh Recruits, and then you have 4 points left over, and I threw them into the health over here for an extra 2% total health. Alternatively, you could do something like this, where you still grab Strategic Prowess and Fresh Recruits, but you put 3 points into Buckler Shield, so you take 9% less counterattack damage. This might be good for the early game, because the early game is where you'll see a larger ratio of your damage coming from counterattacks, but really Buckler Shields, especially in the end game, is not that valuable anymore, because most of the damage you're going to take is going to be from massive skill shots, AoE damage, etc. Now later into your Rise of Kingdoms journey, you will unlock a building called the Museum, and this is where you can invest in some relics for older commanders. And luckily for us, Mehmed does have a relic here, and it is easily one of the best relics in the entirety of the game, and this relic alone is responsible for Mehmed having any sliver of relevance at all in the end game, because the tier 2 upgrade gives you 30% troop health and 10% skill damage. And like I said before, guys, this is universal stats, so you can put Mehmed anywhere you want in your lineup and they're going to get 30% health, 10% skill damage, which is amazing, because as we discussed already, on his kit he has 20% attack and 20% skill damage, so this bumps that up to 20% attack, 30% health, 30% skill damage, and all of a sudden you've got a ton of really great stats for a vanilla AoE commander who can be paired with anybody. The other amazing thing about Mehmed's relic here is something that I mentioned in one of my most recent videos, where I prepare you guys for the future of the museum, and if you missed that video, I highly recommend you check it out after you finish this video. But in that video I talk talk about pretty much the next 7 or 8 months worth of what we can expect from the museum system. And one of the things that I predict will be coming sometime in 2025, I hope, is a 3rd tier upgrade for our leadership and integration commanders from the gold keys, including Ethelfled, including Mulan, and of course including Mehmed, which means this iconic relic is only going to get better over the course of this year. Again, that is speculation. You can let me know in the comment section below, if you're watching from the future, have they added a new relic upgrade for Mehmed just yet? And of course, the trend for tier 3 upgrades is that one of these 2 stats is going to get bumped up. And so I would say we can expect the tier 3 upgrade to either be 35 or 40% troop health with 10% skill damage, or I think most likely we'll see 30% troop health and maybe 15 or 20% total skill damage on Mehmed. Either way you cut it there, I'm stoked about that, and that is going to make Mehmed even more valuable in the end game. He won't be meta, but at least he is usable, and we'll talk about that later in this video. Now, the last thing we have to go over here is what the best formation is for Mehmed, and this really goes without saying, but it's easily the wedge formation. This is giving you a 5% bonus to skill damage, and let me just remind you that the formation only matters for your primary commander. So Mehmed will be a secondary virtually exclusively, and so his formation doesn't necessarily matter, but the primary commander you pair him with should be using that wedge formation, because again, 5% more skill damage on top of the 20 you're getting here, on top of the 10 you're getting from the relic. All of it adds up to more damage on this active skill and whoever you're going to be pairing him with. So with all of that being said, with his entire kit reviewed, let's go over the pros and cons for Mehmed. The pros: he is a free-to-play friendly legendary commander that you can start to get as early as 1 week into your Rise of Kingdoms journey, assuming you get a little bit lucky with your golden chests, or you got him for free from the Buy Star and Moon event, which is also really nice. Hopefully we see more events like this for Mehmed and other legendary commanders. And I should also mention that the relatively new Claim Commanders event, which gives you a new commander every single day that you log in here, you've got a chance of getting Mehmed from this as well, which is great, because as long as you log in for all 42 days, you are actually guaranteed to get Mehmed at some point in there. And so it'll be a full summon if you don't have him, 10 sculptures if you do have him. So all of that to say, he is very free to play friendly for those reasons. But even better than that is the fact that his 2 best skills are his first 2 skills. And with the skill lock feature in Rise of Kingdoms, I'm gonna have to use another commander just to show you, but the skill lock feature allows you to simply lock the first skill, so all of your skill ups are guaranteed to go here, and then once that skill's at 5, you bump this up to 2, you hit save, and now all of your skill points that you add from then on out are going into your second skill. And from there, I would recommend bringing this up to 4, so that way for Mehmed's purposes you'll have a chance of at least getting skill points in the 4th skill, because remember, we don't care about this 3rd skill at all. But regardless, the first 2 skills going to 5 costs a total of 190 legendary commander sculptures. And I'm gonna warn you now, I will not recommend that you use universal sculptures on him, but like I said before, there's many other ways that you can get free sculptures of Mehmed in Rise of Kingdoms, and so eventually you will get him to 5511, or even better 5515, which is a total of 380 legendary commander sculptures. You'd have to get pretty lucky to skip this 3rd skill the whole time, but even still, the point remains that he does not need to be expertised to be usable as a secondary commander. At 5511, sure, his active skill is a little bit weaker and he's only bringing 2% extra unit capacity instead of 10. I understand that, but even still, for 190 legendary commander sculptures that you didn't even use universals for, you just got them for free over time, that's actually really good, on top of the fact that at 5511 you still get the 30% health and 10% bonus skill damage here. That's amazing. And the last pro for Mehmed is one that I've been hammering home throughout this entire video, and that's the fact that he is a universal commander. You can pair him with any troop type and he will supplement very nicely. Again, he might not be meta, but he is a jack of all trades. You can use him anywhere and he fits right in. AoE skill damage is very good for the meta. But let's talk about the cons for Mehmed, because not all is sunshine and rainbows here. First of all, he's an old commander, right? His active skill is very much power crept in the end game. 1150 for a 5511 AoE skill damage with a smaller fan shape is just no match for some of the more recent 5 target AoE commanders like Liu Che, who deals 2250, literally double the damage factor here, and his active skill AoE radius is bigger than that of Mehmed II. So he's definitely been outclassed quite a bit lately, and also he has no march speed on his kit. So Mehmed has one major Achilles heel, and that is the fact that he is slow on the battlefield, and we see this exact same Achilles heel on commanders like YSG. Now luckily for Mehmed, he has 30% health on his kit in the form of the museum relic, and so he's a little bit more tanky than the 20% defense YSG gets from his relic, but even still the slow march speed here is definitely a downside. And the third con for Mehmed is one that we've talked about in this video already, and that's the fact that he's pretty much doomed to being a secondary commander, not only because his talent trees are pretty lackluster, but also because if anybody on the battlefield sees you running a Mehmed primary, they're going to assume that you have no idea what you're doing, that you're a new player, a free-to-play player who just has nothing better on their account, and they will target you specifically above anybody else, because seeing a Mehmed primary basically means that you have a stamp on your head that says free kills, please attack me. That's what that means. And so you can't use Mehmed as a primary, and that's going to round out the cons. So the question is, and I've already answered this, should you get Mehmed in Rise of Kingdoms? Well, first of all, you're going to get him no matter what. Eventually you're going to open a gold key and he's going to pop out. But should you use your universals on him? The answer is no. And you might be thinking, Omniarch, well, I'm only 12 sculptures away from 5511, and you said that's when he starts to be usable, and the answer to that is still no. Don't waste those 12 sculptures. It's not worth it. I know that it might feel like, oh, you just want to get it done, you just want to make him, make him usable, and I know that the temptation is strong, right? Those sculptures are burning a hole in your pocket and you want to use Mehmed, and I get that, right? I get that, but you will regret that investment later down the line, the next time you pop open a gold key and 10 sculptures of Mehmed falls out, and now those sculptures go into the third skill and you just wasted those 12 universals. So never use a universal on Mehmed, even in the early game, even in the end game. The only exception to that is if for whatever reason you're going to go all in on Mehmed for kvk1, and then you're going to commander swap him when kvk2 is over. If that's your plan, by all means go for it. He is not your best choice for that strategy. You'd much rather go for somebody like YSG or somebody like Alexander the Great, or I mean there's many other commanders I'd rather use in kvk1, but if you just love Mehmed for the role-playing aspect, for the culture aspect, for whatever reason he's your favorite historical figure, then by all means go for it, right? Go for it and swap him at the end of that kvk2. But in no other circumstances am I going to recommend using a universal commander sculpture on Mehmed. And also, like I said before, I wouldn't even recommend buying him from the daily special offer, because there's just so many better commanders that show up in this shop, and it doesn't even take that long for them to show up. All right, even YSG and Alex are relatively old commanders, and they're just much better than Mehmed to buy from that bundle. Okay, so I've made it pretty clear here that Mehmed is a great jack of all trades with a couple of downsides, such that he's not worth really investing in, but you will get him to a point where you can use him at some point. And when you are able to, who are the best commanders that you can pair Mehmed with in Rise of Kingdoms? Well, truthfully, getting him to 5511 doesn't sound that bad, but it will still take you quite a while, and so most likely he's not going to get to 5511 free to play by kvk1 or even by kvk2. And so I don't really have any great pairings for you in the early game. If you were to force me to give you some, I would say maybe Minamoto primary with Mehmed secondary. Lots of skill damage there. He gives Minamoto the AoE that he doesn't have on his kit, and Minamoto gives Mehmed the march speed that he desperately needs in the form of the second skill, and the fact that he's just cavalry, which are faster than anything else on the battlefield to begin with. Same thing with Cao Cao, although Cao Cao primary is really a no-go. You might also consider something like Thutmose primary with Mehmed secondary, because he also has a little bit of march speed and he's got a nice AoE here as well. So the bonuses to skill damage that are provided by Mehmed could be quite good, and for that reason we also can talk about Pyrrhus. Once again, he's got a little bit of march speed for you, he's got a little bit of tankiness that you're missing in kvk1 on Mehmed, and he's also dealing some skill damage, so he benefits from Mehmed. But again, kvk1, it's going to be really hard to open field with Mehmed, so much so that I feel like even Minamoto Komodo is really your only best choice here. So with that being said, kvk 3 and beyond is really where you're probably going to squeeze him into your lineup if you have to. And there's a few commanders here that I think make a pretty decent pairing. First of all, my favorite pairing is Huo, and this is the pair that I used in my last kvk. I did Huo primary with Mehmed secondary. My Mehmed was expertise at that time, and he had the tier 2 upgrade for the museum relic, and I'll be honest with you guys, Huo Mehmed actually does pretty good. Why? Well, Mehmed is giving Huo 30% extra skill damage on top of the fact that he's already got 25% skill damage here, and he has a faster rage cycle with more skill damage every time that you either enter combat or get the autumn wind effect or have already fought in at least one battle. There's a lot of stacking skill damage here. It's AoE that Huo doesn't have, which is nice, and giving Huo 30% health, 20% attack is great because Huo already has a ton of stats on his kit: 40% attack, 35% defense. The only thing he was missing is health, and giving him 30% of it makes him a bit more tanky. I would argue that the Huo Mehmed, if Mehmed is expertise with the double relic, is almost as good as the Huo William. Now here's the thing, the William gives you more march speed and a lot of extra support to your nearby armies, so apples to apples they're going to perform about the same, but your other armies are going to perform slightly worse if you bench the William for the Mehmed. That's just how that cookie's going to crumble. So I wouldn't recommend doing it, but if you're only running one march in the open field and you happen to use this, I think that's pretty solid, especially because you don't have to invest in Mehmed. You get him for free, whereas commanders like William require universal sculptures or gems to spin the wheel. Assuming your Huo is occupied though, he's either paired with King Arthur, he's paired with Joan of Arc Prime, or William himself. What are some other commanders that you can put Mehmed behind to make some good use out of him? Well, the first commander we will talk about is CPO Prime, and that is because this commander pairing is tried and true. Lots of players have been using CPO Mehmed for a while now because this is a double AoE pairing. CPO is 3 target damage factor, 2000 nuke with a nice health debuff, and the target's going to be debuffed by the time your Mehmed hits them with his relatively weaker active skill. But once again, just like with Huo, CPO Prime benefits from 20% attack, 30% skill damage, and 30% health on the kit of Mehmed. That's all the things that we really want here for our CPO Prime, and giving infantry 30% health on top of the 20% they already had here makes them a bit more tanky. Now the downside here is this is a slow march, right? I mean, CPO's got some march speed here, which is nice, especially outside of territory, but it's not going to be as fast as your Huo, right? And that's one of the benefits of putting your Mehmed with cavalry. Nonetheless, you still can use this commander pairing, and I like it a lot. In the same vein as that is the Ragnar with Mehmed. Now this commander pairing is going to hit a little bit harder, but it is admittedly going to be a bit slower. He has less march speed than CPO, and that is especially true when outside of your alliance territory. However, you will have the chance of getting some march speed from your enemies, so I don't like relying on this, to be honest with you guys, but it is there to supplement your march speed, and that could help you a little bit. All in all, this is just like the CPO pairing. It'll hit again a little harder, it might be a little slower, and so it's a give and take. If we want to talk about some archer commander pairings that we could use with Mehmed, I would point you in 2 directions. The first one that we have to talk about is Hermann Prime. Hermann Prime is just like with CPO Prime, a generic 3 target AoE with a really solid debuff on the active skill. He's got some nice march speed on the kit here, and he gets bonuses to skill damage himself, and the only stat he's missing is health. So giving Hermann Prime 30% health, 30% more skill damage, and 20% more attack is really nice. But just like with the others that we've talked about here besides Huo, it will be a bit slow, so I will warn you. And also it's kind of just a poor man's version of the Hermann YSG. So in that sense, I'd rather run Hermann YSG than Hermann Mehmed. But if you're using your YSG somewhere else, or you got rid of your YSG during the commander swap event, then Hermann Mehmed is your next best choice. So that's something that I would consider. Another commander you could consider for archers would be somebody like Shajar. Now the thing with Shajar is that she hits really hard, and she has a ton of health and even more march speed than we see on Hermann Prime, and so for her, that 20% bonus to skill damage is going to go a long way for that single target hit, and she's going to be a little faster. Lots of tankiness here. You'll have a total of 65% archer health, and Mehmed gives her a little bit of an attack boost and a skill damage boost that she is obviously missing on her kit here. Again, I'd I'd probably rather run Shajar YSG or something of that nature, but if you're just trying to piece together one extra march for the battlefield, then Mehmed can sort of be that jack of all trades, duct tape and glue to get that last army out on the battlefield. Just make sure you're not compromising too much. You still want to make sure you've got some equipment on it, you still want some decent armaments. Don't put together a super suboptimal march if you don't have at least something for all these slots. Anyway guys, with all that being said, that's pretty much going to do it for today's video. I wanted to give you an updated guide with my thoughts and opinions on Mehmed in 2025, and truly my opinion is that he is still usable in 2025. Even though he is not meta, he's still somebody that can find himself into a murder ball and at least sort of hold his ground. He's not easily destroyed on the battlefield like some of the older commanders are. He can at least come out to play, and hopefully his next relic upgrade will make that even more so the case by giving him either more health or more skill damage. Either way, we love it. With that being said guys, if you enjoyed this video and you made it all the way to the end, drop a thumbs up on it. Helps out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. And comment down below your thoughts on Mehmed. Have you used him recently, and if so, when, how, and did he perform well? And double check while you're down there to see if you're subscribed. You might think that you're subscribed but you're actually not, so just double check, click that sub button, and click the bell if you want to be notified the next time that I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. And quick disclaimer at the very end of this video, if you're watching this at the time that it releases, I am on vacation, so that's why you're seeing me release a couple of updated guides for older content, because, well, first of all, it's relevant. Lots of you guys just got sculptures for Mehmed, and it's been a while since I've talked about him, even though I've used him relatively recently. But also, if there is breaking news that happens this weekend or something like that where I'm just not here to cover it, I still wanted some content that might be somewhat relevant to you guys to go up today, so hopefully you guys don't mind that. I'm flying home on April 1st, just in time for my Kingsland in this KVK. But anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.